Hello, everybody, and welcome back to War Thunder. And I'm continuing on my series today of reviewing Tier 1 planes for each nation. And today we are hopping to the island in the Atlantic, the British. So, what do you expect from flying Britain as your your first nation? What do you expect out of this? If you're brand new into the game, what are you expecting out of the British? Well, starting off with, you are the second most maneuverable nation in the game. The first one being the Japanese, but you're not that far behind. The second is that you actually have a lot of guns on your planes. I'll get to this later on, but even though the guns themselves aren't that great, a lot of these low-tier planes get a lot of them, which does help compensate. But anyway, let's start off with the reserve planes as always. You get the Nimrod Mark I, the Fury Mark I, and the Fury Mark II. Now, I don't know if you caught that on the stat card, but every single plane, these are fully upgraded by the way, has the exact same on the stat card. Now, the only reason why this is called a Nimrod and not like a Fury Mark III or whatever is because I believe this is a naval plane because it has the tow hook here for landing on aircraft carriers. So I think this plane here is just the naval variant of the Furies. Which you've got like two army lines here. Then you've got like your navy line here. Then you've got like a heavy fighter, ground attacker. Then your dedicated bombers. But moving on to the Nimrod and the Furies, there really is no difference between them. So I prefer the Nimrod just because it has this cool little nifty camouflage to it. That is also another thing that they get. They all get these nifty little paint jobs here. I like this little thing here on the front side of the rudder. You know, they look pretty cool. They look pretty sleek biplanes. Most other biplanes in the game kind of look bulky. That's because most of the biplanes use radial engines, while these are using inline engines. So just a quick little thing there, difference between an inline and a radial. A radial is like a big circular engine, while the inline is more of like the traditional engine design. Radials are a little bit more tougher, but they are mostly more exposed to the outside. The biggest example being like the P-47 in the American tech tree. That's a big old radial, while something like the P-51 Mustang is more the traditional inline engine. So with the inline engine, they are fully encased inside the plane, but they are less durable, so kind of evens out. But this low battle ranking, it really shouldn't matter what kind of engine you have. So let's just get it to look on here. So the first thing you're going to notice here is that you have two light machine guns, the 7.7 Vickers E machine guns. Now, back in my Japanese video, the Type 99, I think they were called, they felt like copies of British guns. And the reason why I say that is because they sound exactly the same while they're firing, and they sort of have the same fire rate. I say sort of because I'm not 100% sure, but because I'm taking out the Nimrod here, this does prove that it is a naval plane because it is spawning me on the middle of an aircraft carrier. So, if you listen to the guns in my Japanese video and then listen to these here, they do feel like the exact same guns, just with a different name. So, unfortunately, for the Japanese guns and the British guns are essentially the same, is what I'm trying to say. So, unfortunately, with that, the British reserve planes aren't really that great. So going back to the stat card here, you get a 16-second turn time, but then again, that's just rudder only. And really, these things aren't that great. They're pretty slow in terms of biplanes. They at least feel a lot slower. And because of the guns, they're basically just Japanese biplanes, or the Japanese are basically just British biplanes, which matter how we look at it. So, unfortunately, there's really nothing a lot to cover other than this one is a naval variant, so it can land on aircraft carriers. But armor, absolutely nothing. Just like most reserve planes, you're not going to have anything to really protect you if you get shot up. And on the internals, you see that everything is very, very small. You have a very small and weak engine. You have a very small little fuel tank here. It is self-sealing, but most of the time, if you get shot up in this thing, you're actually going to be able to take a lot of hits. The only times I really ever die in the Nimrods and the Furies is when I get my wings just cut off, which they will after taking certain amounts of damage. So you could be shot up to heck and back, and then somebody coughs, and then that's just enough to break your wings. So I guess that is one thing that these guys got going for them, is that they are fairly durable because all of their components are very small and very tucked into one another. You also are very prone to pilot snipes, however, so take with it as you will, but like I said, the Nimrods aren't really that great, and the Furies. Which is weird, because if you move on here, these are your two reserve Furies, but then you also get a Nimrod Mark II, which is at battle ranking 1.0, and to my knowledge, it really doesn't... It's the exact same plane all over again. See, there's your tow hook underneath here. But unless it has something different on the inside, which it doesn't. Essentially, you get a fourth reserve plane, though, which is nice. You know, it's looking at the stat card, it's exactly the same as the Furies and the Nimrods. But those aren't it in terms of biplanes. You also get the Gladiators. Now, the Gladiators here at battle ranking 1.3, you get a few of them, are really, really nice biplanes. They're large biplanes, for one, so you're unfortunately going to be kind of a larger target. But the biggest attribute that these have is that it upgrades from the Vickers machine guns to the Browning machine guns, which have a much faster rate of fire. And these Browning machine guns here, these 7.7s, now, I'm not too sure if this is true or not, but I think these are just British 303 rounds. So they're not going to hit that hard, but because you do get 4 of them, that's the other big thing about the Gladiators, is that you do get 4 machine guns. They do fire a lot faster, and they actually can produce a fair amount of results. But they're still biplanes, so obviously the disadvantages of the biplane is that they're still going to be kind of slow, and they are fairly prone to damage, but they're extremely maneuverable still. 16-second turn time, again, that's just the stat card. You're a little bit faster than the Nimrods and the Furies, but not by much. Like I said, the biggest thing going for them is the guns and the amount of them. Moving on to armor, again, absolutely nothing. And then the advantage of these biplanes is also the same as the reserve aircraft. Everything is tucked very, very small into one sort of space here. Your pilot does have an enclosed cockpit, which is nice. Also, the one other thing that the Gladiators have are flap controls. You have takeoff and combat flaps. Now, why a biplane would need flaps, I'm not 100% sure. They lose speed fairly quickly once you cut off your engine, so you can just land normally. But, hey, if you ever want to turn faster in a biplane, more faster than what you normally do, just pop the flaps, which actually works out because you can actually keep up with the Russian biplanes with the flaps deployed. Granted, you are also going to lose speed a lot faster in a turn than you would normally, so I wouldn't have the flaps deployed for very long, but you can get a few fast turns in there and keep those I-15s in check. These are what I kind of mostly target when I fly out the Gladiators as I-15s, is because you can't surprise them by keeping up with them. But moving on back to the guns here, you get one here to the left side, one to the right, one out on the right wing, and one on the left wing on these little tiny gun pods here. So, yeah, the guns themselves aren't that great, but because they do have a fairly decent fire rate and you do have 4 of them, you can get some work done in the Gladiators. Now there's the Gladiator Mark II, which is the Army variant. Then you get the Sea Gladiator, which is essentially the same thing. It just has the tow hook on there for landing. Stat card's basically the same. Internals, exact same thing. But you also get another one over here, Tux Gladiator Mark II, I think. But I'll talk about that later on when I get to the premiums. So far, you got pretty crappy biplanes, but really good biplanes, in my opinion, to replace them with. So, moving on here down the line, you get the V156B1. Now, this is a relatively new plane in the game, and at least in my records. And they're basically copies of the American aircraft of the similar nature here. Let me pull them up here real quick. Yeah, the SB2Us. They're basically SB2Us with British armament and British bombs. So take that as you will. It's not a great plane, but because it has 4 of the British guns again, it's more equivalent to the one with the 50 cals. But they're not the 50 cals. You're unfortunately going to be outgunned by the ones with the 50 cals. But moving on to the bomb payload, it's basically the same bomb payload as the others. The British use similar bombs. They also use pounds instead of kilograms, but these green ones here, these are American bombs. So this is a Lend-Lease aircraft. So I've pretty much already covered this thing. It's just replace the guns from 50 cals to these little 7.7s, and as you could tell, you get the same one in the back here. But they're not bad. You get 4 of them here in the front. I haven't flown it out all that much because I'm not that much of a ground attacker, but the few games I have flown in it, it's not too bad. I wish they kept the 50 cals, though. That's my big thing. I wouldn't mind a copy-paste if I just put a British paint job on it with the 50 cals, but you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. So, moving on. That's just kind of what you get here. Mostly people just playing for the bomb loadouts. And heading on, you do get your armor plating there. It's kind of the same as the other ones. You get these weird Lego block looking things. Then you get the nice armor plate in the back there to defend your pilot. The internals, you just don't really have to worry about anything in the wings because the only things out there are your guns. Your fuel tank, however, is blocked by that armor plating right here. The fuel tank's right about there. So this is actually a really resilient aircraft. It likes to actually take hits because, well, it's pretty tanky. But sadly, nothing to protect your gunner, so once you start getting shot at, he's going to go fairly quickly. But yeah, I've basically already reviewed this plane, so I'm just going to move on real quick here. Then you get the British meme plane. Now, back in my, I think it was my Japanese video, where I talked about every nation kind of having a meme plane at Tier 1, where I don't even know if it's in the game anymore, but I just so happen to have it. The Swordfish Mark 1. Now, I would actually say the Swordfish is actually the best meme plane in the game for two reasons. One, you get a really, really nice bomb loadout. You get 4 250s, or I don't have it unlocked, or you can get a torpedo. You can replay the dogfights episode from the History Channel, back when they actually used to play actual historical videos instead of just a bunch of guys in the desert in a pawn store, and actually sink the Bismarck, which I think there's a historical campaign in the game where you actually can fly out these things and recreate and reenact that. But it's actually a pretty decent little biplane attacker. Now, granted, you are only going 140 miles an hour. You are a very, very slow plane. But when you eventually get there, you have some decent payload. Your armor, absolutely nothing. And you do get all your resiliency pretty much comes from the fact that, again, there's nothing in the wings. Everything's in the front here. But another problem with this plane is that everybody's fairly close together. You've got a guy that's labeled as a gunner, but he's a navigator. Your actual gunner, and then your pilot. So it's very common to have all three or both of these guys killed in one shot. But, you know, that's to be expected from this kind of plane. You also have one forward-facing armament. You have this little 30 cal right here, which fires out of the engine here. So it's unfortunately not that great of actually shooting down the ground targets, but you have those 4 250s, which are fairly decent. You get a couple of them on a pillbox, so you can knock it out. So I would say it's the best of the meme planes, but then again, it's a meme plane, so don't expect miracles out of this little guy. Then you move on to the actual, what I would say, the start of the British Air Force. The Hurricane Mark 1L. I'm pretty sure the L means late. Now, remember how I said that the guns aren't great? Like I said, it's the 7.7 Brownings, but you get a lot of them. This one gets 8 of them. 4 right next to each other on each wing. And that's really where this plane kind of gets its bread and butter. Is, yeah, the guns kind of suck, but at the same time, you stick any number of guns together like that, and you actually have a decent plane. This has the Polish Air Force skin on it, as you can tell by the tiny little Polish Randall on there. And then the FAA camouflage, which makes it look a little bit better, but I actually just kind of prefer the original here. But 15-second turn time. You're actually a little bit more maneuverable than the Gladiators, but don't go into turn fights with biplanes. I see this too many times of where people flying Hurricanes who are used to flying biplanes thinking that just because it is a maneuverable plane that you can outturn biplanes. Don't. You'll get yourself chewed up faster than you would like. But, you know, you are one of the more maneuverable monoplanes. Now, this plane isn't that fast, but then again, it's still rank 1. You do get bumped up to battle ranking 2.3, so be careful about that. You want to make sure you have a lineup here where you can actually have planes that are compatible, or that are more competitive at this battle ranking, so just be careful about that. Armor, you actually get a few bits and pieces here. You get a bit of armored glass from the front, protect you from head-ons. You get this little armor plate here behind the engine to kind of guard the rest of the pilot. And then you get this armor plating in the back here to help you from being shot from behind. So fairly tough plane to shoot down. The Hurricanes, both historically and in-game here, were very durable aircraft. Yeah, they were slow. Yeah, at the end of the day, the guns are only 303 British. But you can have some success in this game, but in this plane, if you know how to fly it. Now, moving on to the internals, it just only kind of sort of complements what I was saying with its durability, in that your fuel tanks are pretty small, kind of tucked in the middle of the plane here. Plus, with your pilot actually having some armor plating, you're a really tough plane to shoot down. Unless they get lucky, but it's War Thunder. Anything can kill anything. So then, moving down here, the Sea Gladiators, the same thing as, like I said, with the other Gladiators, so just have to move on from there. There is something I do want to point out, though. Now, in my opinion, the British have some of the most unique and fun bombers in the game. And you start off here at Battle Ranking 2.0 with the Blenheim. Now, I've flown out the Blenheim a lot, which is how I got this nice little fancy training squad camouflage, which kind of resembles a night fighter, but you don't want to be a night fighter in this thing. The best thing I could say about this plane is the turrets. I was going to say the bombs, but the bombs aren't that great. There's only 2 bomb loadouts you get. You can get 4 250s or 2 500s. I mostly just go bunker busting in it and just take out the 2 500s. But, as you can tell, I have the appropriate skin for this night fighter skin. But I'm going to tell you why you don't want to necessarily go night fighter in this thing. Because I just want to show off the turrets. The turrets have a 360-degree view. Except for the front here, apparently. But that's just because the frontal turret here fires pretty much all around here. It takes a little bit to turn around, but mostly from behind, you can have 4 guns facing backwards. The turrets on this plane are really mean. They're both dual-mounted turrets, so you have the turret there with 2 guns, and then the turret there with 2 guns. You do have forward-facing armament in this plane, but it is the weirdest forward-facing armament I have ever seen. It's one 7.7 machine gun, and I'll show you where it is. Way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere on this wing. I do not know why it's there, but it's there. You're not going to shoot anything with it. You're not going to be able to shoot anybody down, because just aiming at the target here, look how far it goes off to the right. Until you slowly get closer and your convergence actually kicks in. But, as you can tell, you can get ground targets with it. You're just going to have to shoot at it for a very long time. It's also a very tiny bomber. It's fairly maneuverable, and it's a fairly small target. Combined with the really mean turrets on this thing, this is a plane you want to be careful of when you're attacking it. But don't use it as a heavy fighter. You have 1 forward-facing gun. The one thing you want to do in this game is, because you get a bomber spawn with it and such trolly turrets, just fly up next to other bombers and let these guys go ham on them. So, anyway, the Blenheim. Like I said before, 4 250s or 500s. I personally use the 500s just because of the bunker busting on there. Fairly maneuverable for a bomber. Kind of slow, but then again, they're early war radial engines. But, there's fighters in this game that are bigger than this thing. Just kind of shows off how small it is. But the ones back here are the Browning machine guns, but the ones up here are the Vickers machine guns. So these ones I do believe fire slower, but you do get two of them, and they're pretty close to one another. Plus, in tandem with both of them here, you can shoot down a lot of things that are stuck behind you. Moving on to armor, your engines actually get some armor plating from behind. Now, granted, they're 0.5 millimeter thick, and so they're there, though. They're there. I feel like they might be more to protect you from flak than anything else, but hey, they're there. Your gunner also gets a little piece of armor plating there, although unfortunately it is behind him, because I'm pretty sure it's his chair. But yeah, that's the 7.7 Brownings, and those are the Vickers. Yep, I was right. But as you can tell, you got a lot of gas tanks in the wings here, so getting shot at means you can catch on fire pretty easily. But don't worry, guys. You got this guy here, 2 miles out from the cockpit. This guy you'll become an ace with this gun right here. Hopefully you're picking up on my sarcasm. But I like this plane a lot, just because at low tiers you get a lot of people that stick on you trying to shoot you down. So you just take manual control of the gunners and then just shoot up their engines, and slowly they burn away. So then, moving on, we get the Hamptons. Not the hotel, but the bomber. The Hampton Mark I, I kind of already reviewed when I did my Russian video. Because the Russian Hampton is this Hampton right here. It gets the exact same bomb loadout, a 4,000-pound bomb, so it's a great bomb loadout. It's just, I've already covered this plane. You get the tiny bits of armor plating here in the front and in the back here for your top gunner. But, you know, if you want a more in-depth review on the Hamptons, just check out my Russian video where I talk about the Lend-Lease version of this bomber. The only difference is that this actually has the British top turret, while the Russian one has a Shakos turret up here and a ball. But, you know, it's pretty quick. It's not terribly quick, but it's quick. But the 4,000 pounds of bombs is what really brings this thing home. Plus, it's also a fairly small bomber, so you're not going to attract that much attention. Then the Hampton Mark II is or the Hampton TB Mark I, sorry. It's basically the same thing, except now you get the 4,000-pound bombs plus the two 500s here on the wings. So basically, the only difference between the first Hampton and this Hampton is this one just gets more bombs. It gets 2 on the wings there. It has a couple of pylons. So you actually have some pretty decent bombing power in this thing. But that's not where I would say the British have fun bombers. The Beaufort is one of the fun bombers because it's actually pretty darn quick. 272 miles an hour is nothing to scoff at, especially at Tier 1. You are battle ranking 2.3 though, so you need to worry about that. The best thing about this though is that it has a dual 50 cal turret here in the back. And flying at low altitudes with biplanes chasing you, you thought the Blenheim's turret shot down a lot of things. Wait till you get some 50 cals back here. Now this is actually an Australian plane. I mean, it's a British plane, but they once I start talking about Tier 2 Britain a little bit, spoilers. Spoilers for a video I haven't made. But you actually do get some Australian aircraft in this game. Now, The only difference between the Beaufort and the Blenheim is that the Beaufort can carry a torpedo. Right there, that long sausage boy down there. And you can also get the same bomb loadout of either 4 250s or 2 500s. Again, I mostly just do the 500s just to bust up bunkers. In terms of armor, you get 2 little weird armor pieces here, which kind of look like doors almost. You get this armor plating here, which is going to protect your pilot right here. Then you get this armor plating, which is going to protect your rear gunner from the back, which is weird because you figure you want it here to protect him, like in the front of him. But also, fuel tanks in the wings, and they are big ones. So, unfortunately, this thing can fly like a tank, just not when it catches on fire. When you catch on fire, you're basically done for. But this is basically the best part about this bomber, is the fact that it can carry a torpedo, and you get a dual 50 cal turret back here, which loves to shoot at biplanes all day. Then we get the beast, the big boy, or every time I call it out, the Sunderland Mark 3A. Head out to the water here, let it load in here just as yeah! Look at that big boy. This thing is a beast. At battle ranking 1.7. You get biplanes chasing after you in this thing, and oh my gosh. If I had the power of video editing right now, I would show that video of the hippo being attacked by 4 different lions, and the hippo just keeps walking. That's this plane right here. Sunderland don't care. Sunderland got places to be. But anyway, let's actually see to what makes the Sunderland awesome. Well, first off, you get 4 500-pound bombs, and you can unlock them first thing right off the bat. So there's 2,000 pounds of ordnance right there. That's pretty good. The second off is this thing has guns for days. Now they're all the 7.7s, but you get 2 up front here, you get 2 up top here, then you get 4 in the back here. And these turrets love to fight things because they have massive arcs of fire. Now, loading in here. It's a seaplane, obviously, so we're going to be taking off from the water. Damn, doesn't that thing just look sexy sitting there? 4-engine bomber, obviously. But you can see the turrets fighting the back there. That's 6 of the 303 British firing, so anybody that sits on you long enough, you're going to deal some damage to them. Also from the side here, that back turret can still get them. And then more towards the front, that front turret kicks in, and anybody in the front here. But this thing has another wonderful, wonderful thing going for it. As you can tell, that awesome bomber cockpit here. Yeah, just look at that thing. Look at that. That thing's just awesome. But you notice we have a little sight sticking out in front of our cockpit. Now it's very tiny. I don't even know if you can see it. You can kind of see it right there, right in front of the glass. Why would I have a gun sight? Oh, wait. I have my own guns. Yes, the Sunderland has 4 facing 303 guns. This thing is the best British Tier 1 heavy fighter. And tell you what, watching these things dogfight other bombers is a spectacle, especially when the turrets get into it, when you get close enough. Yeah, this thing's a spectacle to watch. It also has a unique way of deploying its bombs. As you notice, we don't have any bomb racks. I don't know if you saw that, but there's a little door on the side here. Try to get a better view of it. It's gonna be hard. But right underneath the wing, right in the armpit, there's a little door that opens up and just drops the bombs on these little racks here, which is fun. And my roommate Stephanie is home. Hello, Stephanie. I am covering the floating whale. The flying whale, I should say. Just because this thing's a lot of fun, sorry. But anyway, heading back to the hangar here, just to show off this beast entirely. Because this thing is huge. This thing in real life had its own machine shop on board for in-flight repairs. I don't know many other planes that have that. But anyway, absolutely no armor to speak of, unfortunately. Yeah, I know, it is sad. So, anybody that gets shot up in here is sadly going to get killed just because there's nothing protecting you from outside fire. The internals, though, you just to show you how big that plane is. Look how small your pilot is compared to the rest of the plane. Look at that rudder compared to your back gunner. The cables have so many different links here to go all the way back and then all the way out. Oh my god, this plane is just so much fun. But unfortunately, though, probably the biggest problem with the Sunderland is the very large gas tanks on the wings. So I know it feels like it dies a lot more sooner than what it should, but this thing's just awesome. I highly recommend you give this thing a go and then just start dogfighting with other planes with these guns here, and then let the turrets kick in, and you'll bust a gut laughing. I do every time I fly this thing. Alright, so moving on to premium planes at Tier 1, you actually get 4 of them, which is, I think, the most, at least the ones you can buy directly in the game without going through events or anything. Tux Gladiator Mark 1, or Mark 2, sorry. It's basically the same as the other Gladiators, so it just so happens to belong to whoever Tuck is. Again, I don't cover the historical significance of any of these planes in these videos. I'm just going strictly off of gameplay alone. So, it's another Gladiator. I'm also pretty sure this is the gift aircraft you get when you play the British for the first time, if the British is your first win while flying. Then you get the Havoc. The Havoc Mark 1 is an early A-20. Now, when I get to Tier 2 Americans, I'll describe how awesome the A-20 is. But the Havoc Mark 1 is a very fast, very maneuverable, at least in my opinion. This thing seems to like to turn a lot. It doesn't say so in game, but you'd be surprised what you can pull off with this thing. Very maneuverable, very fast. I would say medium bomber. Mostly just because you get the 4 500-pounders. You also get the forward-facing armament of the 7.7s here. And when I show off the A-20, you'll see how this is like an early variant of it. This is an American plane that they just decked out with British guns. You get a turret down here, and then a turret up here, but this guy up here is going to be doing most of the work. The turrets don't have that great of a firing arc, unfortunately, but whenever I play realistic battles, this, especially low tier in British, this is what I fly out the most. Just because this thing can go in, hit hard, and then get out. So then we get one of... This plane's just... I don't know what to say about it. The Wirraway. It's Australian. This is an Australian plane. It's basically the best Tier 1 British ground attacker in the game. Just because, one, you get 2 500s and then 2 250s, so you get pretty awesome bomb drops. You get these Vickers 7.7 machine guns again, so unfortunately, you know, not really super in terms of the forward-facing armament, but you can get kills with it. You can. Just make sure you have a long enough firing arc on it. Then you get your one little turret back here in the back. No armor to speak of. And it is pretty durable just because the fuel tanks are tucked in pretty tightly, but you're more likely to have your engine get shot out or your pilot dead because it just really doesn't... It just really, unfortunately, doesn't bring a lot other than the fact that it has a really decent bomb loadout. But I enjoy it. Okay? It has its quirks, but I enjoy it. Then you get a Catalina because every nation in the game needs more flying boats. It's the Catalina Mark III, which I'm pretty sure is just the exact same as the 5A. Once again, American bombs, 1,000-pounders. You got the landing gear, so you can land on land and at sea. Same defensive turrets, same armor, same pretty much everything. And I forgot to do the armor for the Havoc here. Because there's a lot of it, there is a buttload of armor for the Havoc. You get a bunch here for your bottom gunner, couple plates here for your top gunner, and then a bunch here to defend your pilot in the front. So this is a fairly rugged plane. This thing takes hits for days, unless it gets caught on fire, because it has pretty significant fuel tanks, and since they're in the front of the wings, you do not want to go head on, because if they hit you across the wing here, you will catch fire. But Havoc is still really good in my opinion. All these planes here, except maybe the Wirraway, are excellent, but the Wirraway I still think is good. But anyway, guys, that's my review of British Tier 1 planes here in War Thunder. You get some pretty nice fighters, some really decent biplanes, an okay ground attacker, a better than okay ground attacker, but sadly these are premiums. You have to fork over real-world money or get gold through wagers or events in order to buy them. And then you get amazing bombers. Amazing bombers for either their bomb loadout or just... I'm going to pull up the Sunderland one more time. I'm sorry. This thing is just so much fun. This thing is just so huge. I don't know if you saw, but at Tier 2, you get another one. Gaijin, if anybody watches these videos, I want more giant flying boats in the game. Preferably at low tier, because that's where they're fun at. But anyway, guys, have a great day, and thanks for watching.